Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're taking an inside look at the cloud computing market, where it's been and where it's going. We'll look at some challenges for cloud customers and ways to address those challenges. To discuss that, I'm joined by a major thought leader in the cloud market. With me is Michael Liebow, well-known cloud influencer and advisor to the C-suite, and just recently, he took a new position as global head of Atos OneCloud. Michael, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, thanks, Jim. It's great to be here. Always thrilled, and it's perfect time of year, right?
So absolutely, and as you get this new job, what will you be doing with the new gig?
I've been pretty choosy about where I want to spend time, and I've been working across the industry, lots of folks advising various companies, for a little bit now, and so I have a good sense of the landscape, and clearly, COVID has been just crazy, but
Totally.
I will tell you that I am hugely impressed with Atos.
Hmm.
They are a company that's on the move. They have been in the US acquiring various companies. They just announced an agreement to acquire CloudReach about a week or two ago.
Mhm.
And they are pivoting in a way that most, they're not a new company. They've been around for a while, right? So, and they have a significant footprint in IT outsourcing and whatnot. They're very strong in Europe. They're growing in the US. So in terms of intent, they are swinging for the fence
Hmm.
in the cloud market. They were at reInvent as a platinum sponsor, so very serious about the ecosystem. They developed a very early relationship with Google, and they have a long relationship with our friends at Microsoft.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's it. All right. So
This camera has kind of yeah, there you go, a mind a mind of its own. Yeah.
so far it's working, although it gets into a bad mood where you might switch to your Macintosh. I don't
It
know, but
doesn't like what I say.
it's kind of its own filter. Well,
Right.
tell me what you're at. So that's Atos. That's the overview of the company. What will your role be?
So I'm now their global cloud leader, head of cloud. So they launched this notion, and I love the brand name, Atos OneCloud,
Okay.
right? And so when we think about what's been happening in the market, with the number of different cloud providers from an enterprise standpoint, with the requirement to figure out where does your legacy or on-prem assets fit into the scheme of things. How are you transforming or transitioning from on-prem to off-prem?
Right.
How are you thinking about hybrid or edge capabilities? There's the number of issues that organizations are faced with in this transition is huge. And so there's a 10,000 plus cloud practice, with capabilities globally, aligned to industry, aligned to region, aligned to the ecosystem. And so now that is all rolling underneath me.
Hmm.
And so 10,000 people growing, it's gonna, given the growth rates, the intent, and given their appetite to roll up, they've made many acquisitions in this space. They intend to make more. So the point is that bringing in this concentrated, capability across industry. They announced a very bold initiative in Europe around sovereign cloud.
Hmm.
So they have obviously a large business with European governments, and so significant focus there. And so what I think you're about to see, and I think it's fair to say that Europe has been somewhat lagging the rest
Right.
of the world in cloud adoption. And I think with their focus and their investments and capabilities, and I'll pat myself on the back with, me coming on board, that the game's about to change.
Interesting. Well, I mean, the complexity you mentioned, I think, brings up a really important point. I mean, I'd love to contrast what was in the cloud with what is now. I mean, if you look back at ancient history, say like 2012 or so, there was one data center connecting one cloud, and it was it was hybrid cloud. It was really exciting. It was really the edge of cloud computing. Now, it's multi-cloud with microservices and container management systems. The cloud is merged with your edge deployment. So, and really, complexity rules. So the question is, how can companies cope with all of this?
Yeah, so I'm going to correct you.
Oh, good.
Back
Please.
in the time frame, like, I'd say between 10 years ago, between 2010 and 2012,
Mm-hmm.
industry was not wrapped around the public cloud axle. It was still thinking that there was a private cloud opportunity, and that private cloud, that organizations would become more nimble, flexible, more responsive to the business, and they would serve up these private clouds. I even wrote an article, I remember, back in like 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Service catalogs were a big deal. And so, the notion then was IT as a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just a straight up cost center. That never happened. Okay. So yes, organizations had virtualized and gotten more efficient with bare metal. So, goodness, but never became more agile per se, more flexible to the needs of the business. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, I joined Accenture in 2013, and we had an intent. The intent was, to get into, public cloud services in a big way. But even then, there wasn't really a robust connection. I mean, Microsoft wasn't really anywhere. Google was nowhere. And Amazon was just starting to, motion into the enterprise, still a very developer-friendly platform.
Right.
Okay, now, fast forward, VMware kind of did its magic, which very impressive. So viable in terms of VMC on whatever cloud. So great stuff there. Google in the recent past has anteed in significantly, to the tune of billions. All right, Microsoft, man, what a success story.
Right.
And then
Really
Amazon, continues, from their day one posture to really expand the market. And in the not too distant future, if you can think about it, Amazon's going to be $100 billion business.
Oh,
right?
no doubt. Yeah.
All right. So, I thought in the circa 2015, this market was going to get easier, less complicated.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Not so complex, a little bit of a shakeout in terms of vendors. The one thing you realize in IT is that vendors never die. They just persist in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Right. Why is that? Right. Because the investment to implement technologies, from vendors, the hangover or the debt that's associated is so great that it's really hard to make the business case in order to clean things up. Simplification, not modernization, simplification. And so I think organizations struggle with how to, clarify, simplify, what their services are to the business. And, so it's very difficult to undo what's been done. And so it becomes just layer, it's like, England or Rome, just layers of ancient civilization built on top of layers.
It doesn't go away. It just gets layered more on top of it.
Right. It's still there. Right.
Sure.
And so I think organizations haven't bit that bullet. And so today they say and they have said for years, 80 to 90% of the IT budget goes towards maintaining the status quo. There's very little money for innovation. I think, the numbers, roughly speaking, because, I spent the last 2 years with McKinsey, there's about 30 to 40% of what you spend is debt. All
Right.
right. It's just hanging on the balance sheet. Nobody's bothered. If it actually was a reportable item for the street, you
Mhm.
might, you might see boards being more active in terms of, wanting to fix the problem.
Right.
But whatever, it persists.
Mhm.
And so, having that kind of debt on your balance sheet, I think, kills your ability to flex, to innovate. And
Right.
that's the thing that I think most organizations need to struggle with. And we coined a term. I wrote a research paper earlier this year, at the beginning, and I said, the notion here is rejuvenation.
Hmm.
All right. You have to take what you have and rejuvenate it. That could be lift and shift. Okay. It could be some remediation, but you have to put it into an environment that's much more nimble, flexible for your needs, the ability to scale up, scale down. All right. And so come up with, a new way of managing that estate,
Hmm.
and then throw off cash so that you can really focus on innovation, in new applications, new workloads, IoT, advanced analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence. These
Yep.
are the areas that if you're not, most organizations might have as a science project, but if you're not really throwing significant investment towards, then, you're going to be caught, kind of flat. You're not going to be, you're going to lose relevance in the market.
Well, which brings us to, what is a typical pain point for companies and cloud? I mean, certainly there are plenty of them. Seems like one of them is, relates to what you were saying, might be planning. I mean, they've set up these deployments without quite knowing what they were doing. Now they're stuck with architecture that's problematic. Agree, disagree?
So I wish there was an architecture, right? I mean,
Okay.
I think the problem with that, the ancient civilization problem is that, you've layered, architecture on top of architecture. You have some
Right.
people would say architecture du jour. Some, in the olden days, right, enterprise architects, it was an exercise, but very difficult to standardize and implement across an organization.
Hmm.
To whatever degree cloud actually, goes from kind of a static view of architect to more of a dynamic view.
Hmm.
All right. So it can flex, so an enterprise architect can actually design, an architecture, a set of landing zones, set of policies that you can implement. All right. And automate and standardize. And then you can review, right? You can audit your estate to see conformance to that. And so in terms of the opportunity, it's huge. To what degree have organizations realized that? And the flip side, to what degree do they have the talent, to really design?
Hmm.
And to what degree do they have the leadership to force compliance?
Right. I mean, I guess there are organizations, a small cohort at this point, that actually are cloud native. They don't have any of the legacy architecture, like Uber, for example. I'm going to guess that Uber doesn't have any legacy architecture. Uber could claim to be like totally cloud native, but it's probably a very small percentage of companies that can make that claim.
Yeah, I mean, yes, coming out of, the valley,
Right.
recent upstarts, they have a relatively clean sheet of paper.
Hmm.
But the day after they implement something, right, they start to inherit, right, whatever past decisions.
Hmm.
And sometimes, organizations make decisions not understanding the lasting impact that those decisions have. So,
Right.
if you go with this particular vendor, or, you've been with a particular vendor and you're not really, willing to separate from that vendor, I think we've had that conversation, right, in the past.
Hmm.
And so you really do need to look at your portfolio and manage your portfolio accordingly in terms of which horses are you riding into the future, that are going to support your business goals.
Hmm.
And so to what degree are those decisions and discussions happening? Are they getting elevated, to the board, to the C-suite, because of the downstream impacts that these decisions, the lasting impacts that these decisions have. And I think that's the trick for organizations that aren't having these sorts of discussions or don't know to have these sorts of discussions. They may be locked up in a CTO office. The CIO may have a different agenda. The CDO may have even a different agenda. And so how do these things get reconciled? And then how does it all kind of roll up into a business case so that you're somewhat assured that you're likely to have the kind of impact you're looking to have, right? So nobody wants to necessarily fund science experiments.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're not cloudy, so you said cloud native.
Right.
Cloud native organizations, it speaks to the point about, your clean sheet of paper. On the other hand, cloud savvy organizations have built the centers of competence. They've staffed, they have programs to upskill their workforce. And so that's the kind of planning that it takes, because cloud skills are in huge demand.
Oh, sure.
And the premium on those today. And so if you're not investing to bring your people up and, not just attract talent, but also retain talent. And this is true for every organization, the demand and the fight for great cloud skills. That's the difference that you see.
Dollars are flowing on that one. Yeah.
So that challenge will continue. And actually, I think it's going to get worse, not get better.
The fight for skills, you mean? The
fight for talent.
Yeah.
I think the talent piece is becoming the biggest issue, biggest impediment, for change, for growth in an organization. And I don't necessarily advocate that you go to some third party and separate yourself from your business, because the business is so entwined with the technology that the closer you put the talent to the business, the more likely you're going to have the kinds of outcomes and impact that you're looking for. And we're seeing this in industry after industry, right? They're realizing that, their industry is no longer what it was. It's become something of a software platform. And that could be true for healthcare. It could be true for automotive. It's definitely true for financial services. So, the fact that these industries are kind of morphing before their eyes, and they haven't shed, kind of old habits. And so, they haven't really integrated around a set of technologies and realized that code is now, rules their business.
Right.
And so, there's so many examples out there. It's crazy, but it's, and then if you're not adopting these new technologies and these new ways of working, you're not going to attract the talent that you need, because quite frankly, a lot of your existing talent is aging out. All right. And so now you've got to refresh your talent pool with new technologies and new initiatives. And so, the challenge around how to do that, particularly around the operating model. And in IT, it's not about the IT operating model. It's about the cloud operating model. And cloud operations are night and day from IT operations. And so you could say, well, we've got old stuff to manage and new stuff to manage. So let's kind of figure out how to, have a management control plane over both old and new. And I'm going to tell you, doubtful that's going to work. All right. But it's like where my skill sets are. It's like where my, I have vendors and I bought these tools and whatnot. So it's just, different day, same stuff. Well, it isn't. All right. And cloud ops in a digital world is a very different animal from anything you've done before.
You use the word future, which I think is a really interesting word, and it's so intertwined. We're always looking at the future when it comes to cloud and IT in general. I'd love to get your sense of where we're going, specifically about that complexity piece you talked about, how you thought at one point it might be getting simpler, but alas, it has really gotten horribly complex. So what do you see for the future of cloud and or multi-cloud? Will the complexity progress until it finally breaks us, or What do you see a few years ahead?
So I try to be cautious about the different buzzwords.
Mhm.
I mean, I actually wrote a piece a few years ago on multi-cloud because it felt
Mm,
like it fit, and then to see like vendors like kind of jump on it
mm,
and turn it into something. I mean, I wasn't thinking through. So it's not about hybrid. It's not about multi. A lot of people think, there's going to be application portability,
right.
or one cloud is going to default to fail over to another cloud. No, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
You're gonna develop workload for best execution venue. You're gonna run it there until it dies. You're not gonna do these fancy. People even can't run cross region. Forget about running across cloud. So, but there's an operational integrity, right, that you need. There, in some way, shape, or form, you're trying to optimize, your own capabilities, your own management system across cloud. All right, but you got to be careful, and this is a key reason, is that the fidelity and the innovation that's baked into these clouds, right? What are they all doing? They're moving up stack.
Hmm.
And so if you try to look at cloud and try to commoditize the underlying layers and then build stuff on top, you're adding complexity. You're not
Mm,
taking complexity away.
mm,
And so you have to avoid what is perhaps a default for a lot of organizations in terms of where they think they should customize or bespoke, versus where they think they should standardize.
mhm.
And so there are areas, maybe in terms of policy enforcement, maybe in terms of security, where not going native to the cloud provider makes sense, maybe. All right. But there are areas where you're going to want to go in deep, and not fear lock-in per se, that you standardize on somebody's serverless technologies.
Mhm.
All right. Because you're going to get the most bang for your buck and attract talent, to your problem, if you're leveraging, whatever full stack. And I think that, that goes back to what we just said before in terms of the architectural decisions and thinking through, the impact on talent, the impact on management, the impact on cost. All right. All of these things become, somewhat critical, as you think through these problems. So you make the right set of choices so you don't end up in a bad place.
I think it's going to be a really interesting sector to cover, and I think complexity will be an issue. But Michael, I thank you for coming on today, and I wish you the best of luck with the new gig. It should be really interesting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. I'm excited. It's a great way to go into 2022, and watch this space, because I think we're going to do some really interesting, very cool, very fun things. And to that other point, talent. We're open for business, and we would love it, right? I mean, there's a huge amount of opportunity here.
Great. Well, best of luck to you.
Thanks.